So, while everyone's been glued to the heavyweight fight between OpenAI and Google, a new player from Beijing has been quietly changing the entire game. This isn't a story about winning with brute force. Nope, it's about a gambit to outsmart the giants with pure intelligence.
But here's a wild thought. What if I told you that on some of the toughest tests out there for AI reasoning and coding, a new model is just winning? A model that, let's be honest, most of us in the West have probably never even heard of.
Okay, let's look at the actual numbers, because this is where it gets crazy. The model's called Kimi K2 Thinking. On this benchmark called HLE, which is like a brutal final exam for an AI's brain, it scores almost 45%. That's more than double Gemini 2.5 Pro. Then you look at SWE Bench, which tests how well it can solve actual coding problems. It's hitting over 71%. It's not just beating the competition, it's lapping them. So you have to ask, how on earth is this possible?
Well, the company behind this is Moonshot AI, and their story is so compelling because it's not about having unlimited resources. It's actually a story of innovation that was born out of pure necessity.
See, here's the core of their problem. They didn't have easy access to the top-of-the-line GPUs that are powering all the big Western models. So that whole strategy of just throw more hardware at the problem, yeah, that was completely off the table for them. They had to find a different way, a much smarter way, to get to the top.
And that way was through a radical new kind of architecture. They didn't just build a bigger engine, they built a fundamentally more efficient one. So let's pop the hood and see how they actually did it.
Okay, so you can think of it like this. On one side, you've got the old-school approach. You use these dense models that fire up all their brain power for every single little task. It's powerful for sure, but it costs a fortune and needs a ton of hardware. Then you have Moonshot's way, smart, sparse models that deliver the same punch but at a tiny fraction of the cost.
Now, the secret sauce here is a technology called Mixture of Experts, or MOE. This is their genius workaround for the hardware problem. Imagine you don't go to one general doctor for everything. Instead, you have a hospital with 384 world-class specialists. For any problem, you only talk to the top 8 experts for that specific issue. That's Kimi. It has this enormous 1 trillion parameter brain, but it only activates a tiny, super specialized team for any given job. You get the power of a giant with the speed and cost of a lightweight. It's brilliant.
The next piece of their puzzle is something called the Muon Optimizer. You should think of this as their secret weapon on the software side. It's a custom-built tool that lets them wring every single drop of performance out of the hardware they do have. It's their way of leveling the playing field when they can't compete on chips alone. And this part is a total game changer for business. See, instead of training a massive AI and then trying to shrink it down later, which can kind of scramble its brains, they taught Kimi to think in this hyper-efficient format right from day one. The result? It's twice as fast with zero loss in quality. That's how you make it cheap enough for everyone to actually use.
Of course, this kind of bleeding-edge research costs an absolute fortune. So let's switch gears and look at the money. Just how are they bankrolling this incredible ambition?
Well, the market has definitely taken notice. By early 2026, the company was already valued at a staggering $4.3 billion. Yeah, this is not just some little research project anymore. This is a certified heavyweight. And just look at this growth. It's absolutely insane. They went from a $60 million seed round to a $1 billion Series B in less than a year. And look who's writing the checks. Tech giants like Alibaba and Tencent. They're all placing their bets on Moonshot. So now they're sitting on a war chest of over $1.4 billion, and they make this really crucial decision. They're not going public. They call it foundational patience, which is a fancy way of saying they're not going to get distracted by short-term market pressure. Instead, they're pouring that cash into what really matters, doing the deep research for their next-gen K3 model and hiring the absolute best talent in the world.
But look, having the world's best tech locked away in a lab is useless if nobody uses it. You have to win the entire ecosystem. And this is where Moonshot's strategy gets really clever. It's about making Kimi completely indispensable. They have this brilliant two-pronged attack called a dual circulation strategy. First, they partner up with Microsoft Azure. This gives global companies operating in China a powerful AI that, and this is key, is fully compliant with local laws. At the same time, they integrate Kimi deep into the productivity apps that millions of people use every day, like DingTalk and Feishu. They're coming at the market from both sides.
And remember all that amazing tech efficiency we talked about? Well, here is the real-world payoff. It translates directly into absolutely killer pricing. For developers, using Kimi is less than half the price of Gemini. And for the outputs, get this, it's a stunning 5 times cheaper. That's not just a discount, that's a disruption.
And that's really the bottom line here. At these prices, high-end AI is no longer a luxury item for mega corporations. You're putting it into the hands of every developer, every startup, every small business. You're fundamentally changing who gets to build the future.
But it can't all be good news, right? This aggressive, relentless push for performance and efficiency raises a really serious question. When you optimize this hard for raw power, what gets left behind? There's a paradox here, a hidden risk that's a critical part of this story.
The data tells a pretty stark story. In its raw, unfiltered state, before they add any safety layers on top, Kimi's model scores a pretty dismal 1.55% on safety benchmarks. To put that in perspective, a raw model from Anthropic's Claude is around 34%. That is a massive gap, and it suggests safety wasn't baked in from the ground up in the same way.
And this isn't just an academic debate. A red teaming report put it bluntly, saying its raw reasoning capabilities have outpaced safety alignment. Basically, its brain grew faster than its conscience. This means they rely on adding safety features on top of the model, not building them into its core. And for any big company thinking about using this, that's a major hurdle they'd have to manage very, very carefully.
So let's pull back and look at the big picture. What does the rise of Moonshot and this unique, powerful, and kind of risky AI mean for the ultimate race? The race for AGI?
Well, Moonshot is not hitting the brakes. They're already hard at work on Kimi K2, which is their answer to whatever comes next, like a GPT-6. And their ambition for it is just staggering. They're aiming to move beyond just completing tasks to something they call autonomous research, an AI that can literally create its own scientific hypotheses and then design the experiments to test them. Which leaves us with one final, massive question. Moonshot AI has proved that smart design can rival and sometimes even beat raw power. So as this new idea of efficiency takes hold, has the global AI race just become a whole lot more complex and a whole lot more unpredictable?